Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 2, Chapter 34. Just before their season at the spa was over, Prince Shtcherbatsky rejoined them. He had been to Carlsbad, to Baden, and to Kissingen with Russian friends, to get a breath of Russian air, as he expressed it. The prince and princess had conflicting ideas in regard to living abroad. The princess thought that everything was lovely, and, notwithstanding her assured position in Russian society, she put on the airs of a European lady while she was abroad, which was not becoming, for she was in every way a genuine Russian baruina. The prince, on the other hand, considered everything abroad detestable, and the European life unendurable, and he even exaggerated his Russian characteristics and tried to be less of a European than he really was. He came back emaciated, with hollow under his eyes, but in his ordinary happy spirits, and he felt still more gay when he found that Kitty was on the road to health. The accounts that he heard of Kitty's intimacy with Madame Stahl and Varenka, and the princess's description of the moral transformation through which his daughter was passing, rather vexed the prince, awakening in him that feeling of jealousy which he always had in regard to everything that might draw Kitty away from under his influence. He was afraid that she might ascend to regions unattainable to him, but these disagreeable presentiments were swallowed up in the sea of gaiety and good humor which he always carried with him, and which his sojourn at Carlsbad had increased. The day after his arrival, the prince, in his long ulster, and with his Russian wrinkles and his puffy cheeks standing out above his stiffly starched collar, went in the very best spirits with Kitty to the spring. The morning was beautiful. The neat, gay houses with their little gardens, the sight of the German servants with their red faces and red arms happily working, the brilliant sun. Everything filled the heart with pleasure. But as they came nearer to the spring, they met more and more invalids whose lamentable appearance contrasted painfully with the trim and beneficent Germanic surroundings. For Kitty, the bright sunlight, the vivid green of the trees, the sound of the music, all formed a natural framework for these well-known faces, whose changes for better or worse she had been watching. But for the prince there was something cruel in the contrast between this bright June morning, the orchestra playing the latest waltz, and especially the sight of these healthy-looking servants, and the miserable invalids from all the corners of Europe dragging themselves painfully along. In spite of the return of his youth, which the prince experienced, and the pride that he felt in having his favorite daughter on his arm, he confessed to a sense of shame and awkwardness in walking along with his firm step and his vigorous limbs. Introduce me to your new friends," said he to his daughter, pressing her arm with his elbow. "I'm beginning to like your abominable Soden for the good which it has done you. Only it is melancholy for you. Who is this?" Kitty told the names of the acquaintances and strangers that they met on their way. At the very entrance of the garden they met Madame Berthe and her companion, and the prince was pleased to see the expression of joy on the old woman's face at the sound of Kitty's voice. With true French exaggeration, she overwhelmed the prince with compliments, and congratulated him on having such a charming daughter, whose merits she praised to the skies, declaring that she was a treasure, a pearl, a ministering angel. "No, she must be angel number 2, said the prince gallantly, "for she assures me that Mademoiselle Varenka is angel number 1. "Oh, Mademoiselle Varenka is truly an angel, allez," said Madame Berthe vivaciously. They soon met Varenka herself in the gallery. She hastened up to them, carrying an elegant red bag in her hand. "Here is Papa," said Kitty. Varenka made a prince a simple and natural salutation, almost like a curtsy, and without any false modesty entered into conversation with him. "Of course I know you very well already," said the prince with a pleasant expression that made Kitty see that her father liked her friend. "Where were you going so fast?" "Mamma is here," she replied, turning to Kitty. "She did not sleep at all, and the doctor advised her to take the air. I've brought her work." "So that is angel number 1, said the prince when Varenka had gone. Kitty saw that he intended to rally her about her friend, but had refrained because her friend had pleased him. "No, let us go and see them all," said he, "all your friends, even Madame Stahl, if she will deign to remember me." "But did you ever know her, papa?" asked Kitty with fear, as she saw an ironical flash in her father's eye as he mentioned Madame Stahl. "I knew her husband, and I knew her a little before she joined the Pietists." "What are the Pietists, papa?" and Kitty, troubled because such a nickname was given to what in Madame Stahl she valued so highly. "I myself do not know much about them. I only know this, that she thanks God for all her tribulations, and above all, because her husband is dead. No, that is comical, because they did not live happily together. But who is that? What a melancholy face!" he added, seeing an invalid in brown coat and white pantaloons making strange folds around emaciated legs. This gentleman had raised his straw hat and bared his sparse curly hair and high forehead, on which showed the red line made by the brim. "That is Petrov, a painter," replied Kitty with a blush. "And there is his wife," she added, pointing to Anna Pavlovna, who, at their approach, had risen to run after one of their children playing in the street. "Poor fellow, and what a good face he has," said the prince. "But why do you not go to him? He seemed anxious to speak to you." "No, let us go back to him," said Kitty, resolutely turning. "How do you feel today?" she asked. Petrov arose, leaning on his cane, and looked timidly at the prince. "This is my daughter," said the prince. "Allow me to make your acquaintance." The painter bowed and smiled, showing teeth of strangely dazzling whiteness. "We expected you yesterday, princess," said he to Kitty. He staggered as he spoke, and to conceal the fact that it was involuntary, he repeated the motion. "I expected to come, but Varenka told me that Anna Pavlovna sent word that you were not going." "That we weren't going," said Petrov, troubled and beginning to cough. Then looking towards his wife, he called hoarsely, "Annetta, Annetta," and with great veins on his thin white neck stood out like cords. Anna Pavlovna drew near. "How did you send word to the princess that you were not going?" he demanded angrily, in a whisper. "Good morning, princess," said Anna Pavlovna, in a constrained manner, totally different from her formal effusiveness. "Very glad to make your acquaintance," she added, addressing the prince. "You have been long expected, prince." "How could you have sent word to the princess that we were not going?" again demanded the painter in his hoarse whisper, and still more irritated because he could not express himself as he wished. "Ach, Bоже moi, I thought that we were not going," said his wife testily. "How? When?" But a coughing fit attacked him, and he made a gesture of despair with his hand. The prince raised his hat and went away with his daughter. "Oh, ach," he sighed. "Oh, these poor creatures." "Yes, papa," said Kitty, "and you must know that they have 3 children, no servant, and no means at all. He receives a pittance from the academy." She continued eagerly, so as to conceal the emotion caused by the change in Anna Pavlovna to her unfriendly reception. "Ah, Volt, there's Madame Stahl," said Kitty, directing his attention to a wheeled chair, in which was lying a human form, wrapped in gray and blue, propped up by pillows and shaded by an umbrella. A solemn and sturdy German laborer was pushing her chair. Beside her walked a blond Swedish count whom Kitty knew by sight. Several people had stopped near the wheelchair and were gazing at this lady as though she were some curiosity. The prince approached her. Kitty instantly noticed in her father's eye that ironical glance which had troubled her before. He addressed Madame Stahl in that excellent French which so few Russians nowadays are able to speak, and was extremely polite and friendly. "I do not know whether you still recollect me, but it is my duty to bring myself to your remembrance, in order that I may thank you for kindness to my daughter," said he, taking off his hat and holding it in his hand. "Le Prince Alexander Shabbatsky," said Madame Stahl, looking at him with her heavenly eyes, in which Kitty thought she saw a shade of dissatisfaction. "I am enchanted to see you, and very fond of your daughter." "Your health is not always good?" "Oh, I'm pretty well used to it now," replied Madame Stahl, and she presented the Swedish count. "You've changed very little during the 10 or 12 years since I have had the honor of seeing you." "Yes, God who gives the cross gives also the power to carry it. I often ask myself why my life is so prolonged. Not like that, she said crossly to Varenka, who was trying without success to wrap her in a plaid. For doing good without doubt, said the prince with laughing eyes. It's not for us to judge, replied Madame Stahl, who had not failed to observe the gleam of irony in the prince's face. I pray you send me that book, dear Count. I thank you 1,000 times in advance, said she, turning to the young Swede. Ah, carried the prince, who had just caught sight of the Muscovite colonel, and bowing to Madame Stahl, he went away with his daughter to join him. This is our aristocracy, Prince, said the colonel, with sarcastic intent, for he was also piqued because Madame Stahl refused to be friendly. Always the same, replied the prince. Did you know her before her illness, Prince? That is, before she became an invalid? Yes, she became an invalid when I knew her. They say that she has not walked for 10 years. She does not walk because one leg is shorter than the other. She's very badly put together. Papa, it's impossible, cried Kitty. Evil tongues say so, my dear, and your friend Varenka ought to see as she is. Ugh, these invalid ladies. Oh, no, Papa, I assure you, Varenka adores her, cried Kitty eagerly. And besides, she isn't deformed. Ask anyone you please. Aline Stahl knows her thoroughly. Maybe, replied her father, pressing her arm gently, but it would be better for people to be a little less conspicuous in making their charities. Kitty was silent, not because she could not have replied, but because, even to her father, she was unwilling to reveal her inmost thoughts. There was one strange thing, however. Decided though she was, not to unbosom herself to her father, not to let him penetrate into the sanctuary of her reflections, she nevertheless was conscious that her ideal of holiness as seen in Madame Stahl, which she had for a whole month carried in her soul, had irrevocably disappeared, as a face seen in a garment thrown down by chance disappears when one really sees how the garment is lying. She retained only the image of a lame woman who stayed in bed to conceal her deformity, and who tormented poor Varenka because her plaid was not arranged to suit her, and it became impossible for her imagination to bring back to her remembrance of the former Madame Stahl.